Inner Peace Better Health, where growth knows no age limit. I am your host, Shreya, and tonight we are joined by Erika Andersen, renowned leadership advisor, best selling author, and now a guide to thriving in life's most liberating chapters. This isn't about retiring, it's about reimagining. So, welcome, Erika. I'm honored to have you on my show.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm sure we're going to have a wonderful conversation.
Yes, definitely. And Erica, you have coached some of the biggest names in leadership. What inspired you to shift your focus to later life?
It's a great question. This is my sixth book. And when I write a book, it's always because I'm trying to crack a code. I'm trying to take a topic that people see as difficult or maybe even impossible and complicated and help people find a simple path through it. Like, for instance, I've written books about managing people and how to be a good leader and how to learn better and how to think strategically, how to go through change. And so as I got into my late 60s, and during the pandemic, I had a lot of time to think, and I realized that as I got older, that the new code that I wanted to crack was how to get old well. And I figured that everything that I had learned in coaching executives and helping organizations succeed over the past 35 years, and everything I have learned personally by having done meditation since my 20s and getting old myself. And then I did lots of interviews. I interviewed a couple of dozen people in their 60s and 70s and 80s. And they just came together into this new book, which is doing very well.
Yes, that is so wonderful. And thank you for sharing your story with us. And did writing this book feel more personal or vulnerable than your previous book?
It did. That's a really good question too, because so much of um, what I talk about, I mean, I always try to practice what I preach. I always try to do what I advise or encourage people to do in my books because that feels morally correct to me. But this one, yes, was much more personal because I'm going through it all myself. I'm in my 70s. I'm in the third chapter of my life. And I am creating a wonderful later life for myself using the advice that I offer in the book. So yeah, it felt very personal. And there's a lot of examples from my own life.
Yes, that pivot speaks to so many who feel the pull to evolve their story, not end it. And
Yeah.
what is the biggest beat you see around aging that you were determined to challenge in the new old?
Hmm. That's a great question, Shreya. So let's start with the title. So the reason I called it the new old is because it's the first time in history that we know of that most people have the chance to get old. In 100 years ago, 1 out of 20 people in the world were over 65, and now 1 out of 6 people are over 65. Most people get to live past 60 now. And not only that, but if you're a reasonably healthy 65-year-old right now and don't smoke, you have about even odds, about a 50% chance of living to be 90. And that has never happened in the history of humanity.
Yeah.
So we're still kind of caught in this idea that life is sort of two chapters and an epilogue. The first chapter you grow up, the second chapter you're an adult. And then in the epilogue, you hang around for a couple of years and get old and frail and die, right? And now that epilogue is a full third chapter. People live 20 or 30 or even 40 years after they turn 60. So I really wanted to kind of slash through that idea that old age is short and weak. And that in our 60s and 70s and 80s, we can envision and create for ourselves wonderful lives of joy and purpose and discovery and challenge and interest. And so that was really what I was trying to crack in writing this
That
book.
is so wonderful. That is so wonderful. And the way you just said it just makes it so wonderful. And How do we begin to rewrite that script, especially when the world often resists it?
Mm, mm. Okay, so the way I framed the book to answer exactly that question is in the form of three principles. I didn't want to just give specific advice that feels kind of low level, eat this, do this kind of exercise. I wanted to pull the camera back. So the three principles that I offer, the first one is be the boss of your life. Because a lot of times what our ageist society does is takes away agency, takes away bossness from older people. Kids try and kind of run their older parents' lives and also a lot of people when they retire, they kind of drift. They don't feel a sense of purpose anymore because work established a lot of that sense of purpose. So in that section, be the boss of your life, I teach the reader an approach to creating a vision for this third act of your life. Who do you want to be in this third part of your life? And what kind of a life do you want to have so that you're clear? You're not just drifting or kind of, fading away. I have purpose. I have joy. And then how do you make a plan to make sure that vision comes to pass? And how do you sort of build a crew, build people around you, friends and family, but professional people, healthcare providers, people who help you with your house? How do you build a crew to help you? So that's the first principle. And the second principle, which I think has a lot to do with this podcast, Inner Peace, Better Health, is master your mindset, right?
Yes.
Because it turns out that having a hopeful and accurate and positive mindset about aging is probably the single most important thing that older people can do to both extend and improve the quality of their life. There's a wonderful study that was done by the Yale School of Public Health in the US about 25 years ago. They took hundreds of people between the ages of 50 and 80, and they asked them, they did a kind of survey with them to find out their attitudes about aging. And they were all true false questions, and they were questions like, one of the questions was, old people are a burden on society. So if you answer that question yes, then clearly you have a negative attitude about
Yes.
aging. But if you answer it no, then wait, that's not right. You have a positive attitude about aging. So they asked these questions and then they divided this group of hundreds of people just by that, just in terms of this part of the group has a positive attitude about aging and this part of the group has a negative attitude. And then they followed them. They followed their lives for 23 years. And they found out that just that one difference, having a positive mindset and attitude and thinking pattern, internal monologue about aging versus a negative one, added 7.6 years to their lives. Those people lived more than 70 years longer on average. Isn't that wild?
Yes, it is.
And so, in that section of the book, I teach people how to manage their self-talk, how to change their internal monologue about aging. Like if you're saying something when you're 65, if you're saying something to yourself like it's all downhill from here, right? You can change that. You can decide to speak to yourself differently. You can say instead, wait a minute. I don't know if that's true. And I have some power in this situation. I can make it so that it's not all downhill from here, so you can talk to yourself differently. And that section, again, this I think is relevant to your podcast. The second chapter in that section is about mindfulness, is about creating a habit of being present in a non-judgmental way to experience your life. Because a lot of what happens when people get older is they project out of the moment, they project in the future, oh, I'm going to get sick, or oh, I'm going to get weak, or oh, I won't be able to walk anymore. They just make things up. And creating a practice of mindfulness keeps you in the present moment where you are walking and you're not sick and you can just enjoy your life in this present moment. And then the last chapter in that section is about gratitude, how to create a daily gratitude practice. Because like mindfulness and like managing your self-talk, it turns out that if a person focuses even just a few minutes every day on being grateful for what they have in their lives, it both extends their life and improves the quality of their life. So that's that section.
Yes.
And the last principle is called get good at change. Because a lot of younger people, part of ageism is younger people think that older people's lives are just stagnant and boring and unchanging. But it turns out that as we get older, there's lots of change. And lots of times it's difficult change. It's change that sort of comes at you and you don't really have a choice. Like, you know, you get divorced or your partner dies or your kids move away or you get an illness, all these changes. And you can either resist them and feel angry and depressed and resentful every day, or you can get good at change. And so in the first chapter in that section, I teach people a process. And again, it's a mindset based process for getting okay with necessary, inevitable change, how to be okay with it mentally. And so that you can then, in response to that change, modify your life in the way you need to gracefully. An example I always give is if you've always been a tennis player, maybe you'll play pickleball instead. It's your body, it's easier to do. And then the third chapter, the last chapter in that section, is about learning because older people often worry, and society supports this, that we can't learn when we get old, that our brains are going to fall apart. Turns out that's not true. You can keep learning new things your whole life. And so I focus in that chapter on deciding what are the kind of things you like to learn and how to go about learning them. And I use myself as an example because my husband and I, over the last couple of years, we moved to Spain. We live mostly in the north of Spain. And I've learned to speak Spanish. I started when I was about 65, and now I speak Spanish pretty well. I can do everything I need to do in my life in Spain in Spanish. So then the final chapter is about connection, about how important human connection is at any stage of life, but particularly when you get old. And lots of times when we get older, our connections fray. People move away, our kids have their own lives, our spouses may die, or we may get divorced. And people often aren't used to making new connections because most of their previous connections may have happened through work or through kids' parents, the parents of friends of your kids. And so in that chapter, I talk about how to make new connections and new friendships and new groups, be connected to new groups when you're older. So that's it. That's the book.
Yes, it is. It's very easy for all kind of uh, listeners and audience to understand. It's so beautiful. And
Oh,
also, how do you personally continue growing and stretching into new spaces?
as I said before, I practice what I preach. So I have my own vision that I created for my 70s. And my vision, the vision of who I want to be, is full of light, strong, deep, and magical. That's my vision for myself. That's how I envision myself in my 70s. And my vision for my life is it's about exploration, that I have the time to discover and support and enjoy myself, the world, and those I love. So those are kind of my North Stars. I think about that almost every day. And then I work on mastering my mindset and I work on getting good at change. And a lot of it is, to me, I have to say, joyful. For instance, living in Spain, where we have a whole new language and a whole new culture and a whole new city and new friends and just it's fascinating. And whenever my interior monologue says something to me like, "Oh, I don't know, I'm too old." Like last year I took in our city, which is called Oviedo in northern Spain, there's a wonderful open university that anybody can sign up for classes. And there was a course called Mitos y Leyendas de Asturias y Oviedo, which means myths and legends of Asturias and Oviedo. Asturias is the part of Spain we live in. And my first thought was, oh, my Spanish isn't good enough. I'd be embarrassed. I wouldn't be able to do that. And I just talked back to myself. I just said, wait a minute. Even if you don't understand everything, you'll understand most things and you can ask questions and it'll be fun. Come on. And so that's what I do. I just practice what I preach. I create a good internal monologue for myself, and I just, I get curious.
Yes. And that kind of curiosity is so contagious and it keeps life expansive and not shrinking. And
Exactly. Yeah.
you use the phrase crafting your best later life. So, what does craft says just aging?
I'm sorry, your voice cut out there. Can you repeat
Yes.
that question? I couldn't.
Uh, you use the phrase crafting your best later life. So,
Yeah.
what does crafting mean to you in this context versus just aging?
Oh, so it goes back to being the boss of your life. I think a lot of people do just age. They figure, well, I don't work anymore. I'm getting old. I guess I'll just kind of hang around until I die. And crafting means to have agency, to empower yourself, to say to yourself, and it's true, it's not just made up. I have the power to choose, to decide the kind of life I want to have. And certainly there are unexpected things and circumstances over which you don't have control, but you can also choose how you react to them. Like for instance, a few years ago, my husband, I guess this was 4 or 5 years ago, my husband's hip started to hurt, and it started to hurt more and more when he walked. And he could have just kind of put up with it and taken painkillers, but he's like, no, I want to find out what's going on. And he went to the doctor, and it turned out that he needed a hip replacement. And so got the hip replacement. We talked a lot about it, about how he wanted to do that and what he wanted to do afterwards. And he did all the physical therapy, and he had to walk with a cane for about a year, and now he doesn't. It's about taking back your own power, not giving it away when you get old, so that you can craft and create the kind of life you want.
Yes, I love that idea that aging is an art, not just a biological process. A-
Yes, yeah.
And are there particular skills or mindsets that help people make that shift consciously?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, and we talked a little bit about this before, is to really, my mom, who was an amazing person, used to call it having good mental hygiene. And what she meant by that was cleaning up your mind. When your mind tells you negative things, when your mind predicts catastrophe, when your mind tells you you can't do things, you don't have to buy that. You can consciously change how you talk to yourself. And the process that I teach in the book is okay, when you're talking to yourself in a negative way, usually you can feel the impact. It impacts you emotionally, right? You start to feel anxious or afraid or demotivated. So notice that if you're starting to feel anxious or afraid or angry or demotivated and you don't know why, notice what you're saying to yourself. Notice what your interior monologue is. And then, and this is an important thing, then write it down. And you can write it down, by hand, or you can write it down on a phone or a computer. But it's very important to do that because it gets it out of your head when we're saying, like, if again, I mentioned this earlier, if somebody's saying to themselves, oh, yeah, I'm 65, it's all downhill from here. It's just going to get worse and worse. When that's in your head, it feels like you, and you don't feel like you have power over it. It's like, yeah, that must be true. I'm saying it to myself. But when you write it down, it separates you from it. And you can see it as it's kind of like cutting your hair. When you cut your hair off, it doesn't belong to you anymore. So if you wrote that down either on a piece of paper or on your phone or computer, and you saw it and it said, it's all downhill from here. My life's going to be terrible. Usually, your first reaction is, "Wait a minute, that's not true. I don't believe that." So then the next step is to change it, to change what you're saying to yourself. And you can, the two things that have to be true about it, it has to be believable by you. Like if you, so let's say this statement is, my life is all downhill from here, right? And instead you decided to say, oh, I'm going to be just like I was in my 20s. Well, that's not true. And it's not believable. So you won't believe it. And you'll just keep saying the negative thing to yourself. So it has to be believable by you. And it needs to be hopeful. It needs to be something that will move you in a more positive direction. So you might decide to say, you look again at your written down thing and it says, it's all downhill from here. And you might decide to say, I don't know if that's true. And I want to make my life as positive as possible. That's doable, right? That's doable. And so then every time, and then it's like you just have to keep hitting it over the head. Every time your mind comes up with that idea that, oh, it's all downhill from here, you go, no, 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 wait a minute. I'm not sure that's true. And I want to make it as positive as possible. So you're just changing the way you talk to yourself. It's a simple process, but it really works. It's very powerful.
Yes, it's truly powerful, and you explained it so beautifully again. And this is like a curiosity of mine also, and I think many of our listeners would be, even if they are not old yet.
Yes. Oh, managing your self-talk. Somebody years ago in one of my previous books, somebody said to me, and I thought this was a great question, an interviewer. Um, they said, okay, so of all the skills you know and have taught over the years, if you could only use two of them, which two would those be? And my answer was listening, which I just think is the foundation of all success, and managing my self-talk. I mean, being able to manage my self-talk has taken me through, the deaths of my parents, the breakup of my first marriage, health problem, you make your life worse if you talk to yourself negatively about the difficult things that happen. And you can make your life better if you speak to yourself accurately and hopefully about the difficult things that matter. And I completely agree with you. It doesn't matter whether you're 20 or 30 or 50 or 100, that managing your self talk is a very, very powerful human capability.
Yes, true. And I think sometimes it's not age that dims our fire. It's the disconnection from meaning of ourselves. And this is a wonderful conversation with you, the way you shared your story, and if after this my listeners want to connect with you, then what's the best way?
Oh, okay. So, one way is I have a website that is just my name, erikaandersen.com. And you can find out about all my books, including the new one. And that's a good resource. And also, I have on Substack, I now have a Substack called The New Old, and it's Substack Eric Andersen 1. So, if you're on Substack, that's a good place to connect with me too.
Yes, and I will make sure to attach all the details and links below so that the listeners can find them easily and get in touch with you and read more about you and know more from you, because you are a wonderful person, and the way you speak and you share the knowledge, it's really, really so soothing and beautiful. And to all my listeners, if tonight started a question or a dream inside you, don't wait. Start crafting, because the best chapter aren't always the first. They are the ones you write with full awareness and bold intention. Until next time, stay curious, stay lit. Thank you.